Before we get to listen to class for the day, we will be having a special speaker with us today. This is Sam Munyuwiny, who will be sharing with us about life skills and child development. And so that is what we'll be covering today. I hope and pray that I will all have a great time together learning. I will all be also inspired. These are great things we keep learning every day that help us with our parenting so that we can be able to get our children on the right path as well. But before Sam comes in, I'd like to say a word of prayer. Father, Almighty God, we are so grateful to be here this wonderful evening. And Father, we thank you for that which we've been learning in the past. We've had a great time learning about just how we can raise up great children. Each and every one of us, I want to believe we have all been inspired and encouraged, and are looking forward to even learning much more. And Lord, we pray that it will be a blessing and that your name will definitely be glorified. We pray for those who are yet to join in, the Lord, they will also come in as we continue learning together so we can all be encouraged through this lesson. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. It's great to see us all. Just without any further ado, carry on.
Thank you, Sami. Thank you, Eunice. Thank you so much for organizing this and just leading us all through. One is really to thank God for this privilege and to say this is really within the plan of God that we can be able to be intentional in how we bring up our children. So we'll be talking about child development and life skills. I'll begin by introducing myself. So my name is Samuel Munyuwiny. I work with African Institute for Children's Studies. This is a Pan-African organization registered in Kenya first, and now in a few other countries. And what we try and do is to contribute towards having a responsive and nurturing world for every child. I'm privileged to be a founder member and current head of the organization. And our mission is to provide knowledge and expertise on childhood, child development, and child welfare. And we do this through research, training, and influencing and modeling effective interventions, as is indicated there. You can find more on our own website. But more importantly, I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. I was baptized in February the 2nd of 2002, and been really privileged to walk this journey. I'm married to one wife, and we are privileged to have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. The oldest is teenage. She's turning 15 at the end of this year. The other one just turned 13. Another one is 9. The boy will be turning 4. So parenting and just how we bring up our children in terms of child development is a matter that I hold very passionate about. I live for that. I also earn my bread from it. I also teach at Daystar University, and I was hoping one of my co-colleagues in the Institute for Child Development will join us. We'll figure it out. So welcome, and not just for this conversation, but there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to child development. Actually, the course is done as a whole master's program, that will take you about 2-3 years. So what we can do in 40 minutes will be really to inspire conversations. I hope we will begin more conversations. I really appreciate the important role of child development in the society, in God's family as a whole. So to begin with, I think this is a good place to start. There's a Proverbs 22 verse 6. It's very difficult to talk about child development, upbringing them properly without talking about this. So it says, train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. When we come to the conclusion, I think you will appreciate the role of intentional parenting. So if you forget everything else I will say today, please don't forget intentional parenting. that for us to bring up our children in a manner that they will be ready to serve God in a great way, and serve this country, serve the nations, it has to be very intentional. Let me just throw in the conversation that is going on at the moment about CBC and all that, and saying, oh, why do we have this thing that demands too much from me? I think the one thing it brings that has been missing is the intentional parenting, the important role of parents in that. But maybe the question is, do you agree with this statement? You know, is it true that how you bring up a child is how they will go? Now, I know I'm conscious I'm speaking here to people who perhaps have much older children. And you're so aware of how many pastors, their children are nowhere close to what they have been teaching. And perhaps you're wondering, does this always work? Is it true? Is there for something that we can do differently to be able to bring out what I will call the outcomes that you expected out of a child? I wish this was a physical meeting, because then we'll have conversations together and just work through these things. But something I want to give you a minute to think through. So I've just talked about outcomes, meaning the results of what you've been doing, what you've been investing in as a caregiver. I will soon mention why I will be using that word more often than the word parent. As a caregiver, as someone who's been responsible for a child, okay, meaning we all expected to play a role in a child that we come across. That's why I'm saying caregiver rather than parent. At what age will be appropriate for us to say, okay, I think when they turn 13 and they have passed their KCPE, then I've done well. Is it when they are 18? Is it when they are 25? What stage is it that we will say, oh, they did not depart? Because everything we're going to talk about here is about preparing people for that. You know, recently, at the encouragement of my board chair, you know, I went to meet a psychologist. Please usianze kusema huyu mwalimu ama pastor ni mwenda wazimu. Actually, he told me a lot of us need to see him early. He's a relatively younger man, but already the experience he has in speaking to people who are 80-year-old, people whom you will think are very, very successful in, I don't know what your measurement of success is, but who are having serious struggles, either in their mental health, in their relationships, you know. The thing that really matters there, the connecting dots from his experience of supporting people in this city, is what happened to them between the ages 0 and 4 years, a good number of them. So today, you could be struggling with something in your marital relationship, in your workspace. It could be this thing that stops you from breaking the ceiling in whatever thing that you're dreaming about. It could be in your relationship with God. Do you realize that a lot of that is what was invested in you between 0 and 4 years? Isn't that something to really think about and say, wow. So what have you done to the 0 to 4 year? I'm emphasizing 0 because there's a lot of things we do from the time of conception. The worries that the mother goes through, the kind of statements that the father makes, the presence or absence of a father or a father figure, those implications are not just about now. That is what you harvest as a country eventually. So much so that there's going to be a bigger crisis ahead of us. Not trying to be a prophet of doom, but the truth is, there's a generation, I think I'm included there, that has transitioned from parenting styles that were so different in the up to the early 80s and have changed significantly in the 2000s, especially with information technology age. And we're throwing in a lot of confusion because we ourselves are confused. We do not know how to do this. And we are doing this to 0 years, 4-year-old, 16-year-olds. And sometimes you think, well, I was just busy. I was just trying to raise money, you know? And there are too many stories that I don't have the time to share of people whom we think are very successful. Let me just throw in one example before I go therefore into what is the role of the parents in all this. There was a real case story of a senior executive person in the corporate sector, CEO of a major company in Nairobi. You know, people who spend more time in the air than on the ground. And when she was told about what the 16-year-old son was doing in school, she was like, not my son. You know, and that has been happening for so long. And a lot of the reactions that the son was doing, which included substance use or drug abuse and all these things, were actually a reaction of the absence of the parents in the early stages. So we'll look at some of these things in this short conversation and hopefully inspire you to go and read more, to go and ask more questions, and to try and engage with more people. In any child development, we keep saying there's a role of nature and nurture. Where exactly do those get in terms of boundary? And is there one that is more important than the other one? I think this is a critical conversation when we eventually get in there. So let's begin by just explaining the structure of our conversation now. So we want to explore the linkage between the two, and more importantly, the role of the significant adult caregiver. Please note that I'm intentionally ignoring the word parent because we all have a role. And, you know, there's something they call Ubuntu, from the South African Ubuntu, which says, I am because you are. The idea that as long as my children are safe and fine, then it's okay, is completely wrong. Because tomorrow the person who will marry my daughter will be your son. And so, you know. So it's very, very important that we support each other in this. So that's another call. If you forget everything else, please think around whom are you mentoring, whom are you playing a role in addressing this, their child development and life skills. Let's go into a bit of definition of the concepts. So first of all, we'll need to define what child development is. And we'll also describe or define what life skills are and what is the scope of them. Again, these are courses that can take you an entire 2 years to study. So I'll just get you to be interested and go ahead and do more. But let's make sure that we are in the same page in defining who is a child. Again, one of those I wish we were able to listen to you. I believe most of you will say a child is anyone below 18 years. If you've read the Kenyan Constitution, that's what it says. If you read the Children's Act, we have a new Children's Act. It's called Children's Act 2022, was just passed. Brings in tremendous changes in how the government and communities are supposed to work to bring up the children in this country, including creating child welfare fund for counties so that when a child is in the street, you can call a number, they'll be picked and there's money for how to take care of them. It's just been approved this year, so give ourselves a few more months, hopefully some of these things come out. So we've defined a child, but I want to throw spanner in the works in that if you went to somewhere in Garissa or Kajiado, even Nairobi, by the way, I did a study that involved sampling households in Bahati area of Nairobi, and we were surprised at how many girls who are 17-year-olds who have a child and who live with a man because they're married. Is that a child? Now, what I'm throwing to you is start being very conscious that how you work, what childhood is defined by many things, including some people who are children by law and by biological development will actually consider themselves not children. You know, if you are a parent here and you have your child who has had a child as a child mother, how do you relate with them? Because then you've got to be aware and appreciate how their brain works, what are their needs at that stage, and it's not just the diapers, but what are their cognitive, psychological, social, emotional needs that they have to be able to respond appropriately to such a child. Because the truth is they're children. Yes, they have another child, but they're children. So just how do you engage with them at that age to make it appropriate in how you do it? So hopefully we can be so aware of these developmental stages, which you can Google easily and see. So I'm not going to try and, get you to be lazy on that. I'll let you do some of this detailed work, but just to inspire some quick thoughts that you'll go hopefully and try and read more. So let's begin by defining child development. So there are many definitions, but I like this one in particular because it sort of attempts to summarize all the key areas that you as a parent, as a caregiver, you ought to be very aware of. So it simply outlines that a child development is the physical, language, thought, emotional changes that occur in a child from birth to the beginning of adulthood. Now, that's why the law has defined when does adulthood begin. So on the 17th year, on the 11th month, on the 31st day before midnight, you are a child until then. And how we treat you before the law, even if you're an offender or a child against the law, is very different after that. Why are those critical? Because of the key stages of child development that has serious impact on how things happen. So let's just quickly outline this. I have some slides which I doubt if I'll have the time to do it, but I'll try and highlight certain critical developmental issues in each of these. So there are several categorizations. You can break this down to 0 to 2 months, all that, but just for the sake of this conversation, I want us to address it from this broad level. There are 3 critical stages that every child will be going through, and you need to be aware of it and treat them according to those stages. And what is it that happens in those stages? So whatever I've put in brackets is an attempt to just help us quickly capture what is the important thing that is happening at that stage and how do I come in on it as a caregiver, as a parent. So one is the early childhood. I know I've written here 3 to 6 years, Some people say 3 to 5 years. But I want to emphasize their first 1,000 days. Okay, this is about 3 years. This is so important such that over the last 5 years, there's a growing number of universities, of governments that have been very, very intentional on what happens right from the time conception has been detected. So things such as, if you want to prevent mental health diseases, it begins from the 0 days. That's why we put mothers on folic acid, for example. Why? Because in those first 1,000 days, the thing that happens that is so critical is brain development. In fact, there is a lot of evidence from research, published papers from different countries that show that for you to change a country's development, to remove poverty, is not just to build more roads. Actually, the thing that will change a country in the next 20 years, and for sure, is the investment you make in the first 1,000 days. Because the ability of people to be creative, the ability of people to be able to change things is not what they learn in school. So sometimes we are there hammering your child when they're in class 8 or form 4 and saying, you must work hard so that you can be a doctor. The doctors were formed in the 3rd month in the womb. The creative thinkers were formed many days earlier on. Luckily, God usually has grace even in nature. So there are mistakes that we will do. For example, we'll refuse to take folic acid because it tastes bad, and iron tablets as an expectant mother. But you have a chance to catch up in things like breastfeeding. You know, there are a lot of disability that can be corrected in ensuring that childbirth happens correctly, especially in brain capacity. You know, for example, the child being born and able to cry immediately and breathe in, and you know, the way we monitor the skin and the bluish thing, you know, that those are very critical parts of ensuring that there's no disability, there's no retardation. Then the other bit is a kind of food, therefore, that we give in that period. Unfortunately, for most cultures, you will find mzee akiingia in the evening, yeye ndiye anapewa mayai na kasupu ya kanyama kalibaki, watoto walipewa uji na cabbage or something. Yet these ages are extremely critical. So if you want to address poverty in your household, address poverty in this country, this is where you begin. Brain development. The other thing I just want to point out there, because it's a common problem that is going on in our country now and in the society, is the influence of screen technology. How much time you have your child playing on phone, watching TV, being on a computer, it's called the screen technology, has been shown to almost directly affect the brain development. The most creative people, at least from the data that we have now, we don't know how this will change in the next 100 years. Maybe we will change as human beings and how we use our brains. But currently, the way the tasks that we do requires that you reduce the amount of time people spend on screen. Some countries, I think Sweden is one of them, has emphasized and put in a policy that you can't spend more than 8 hours, is it per week? No, sorry, people up to 80 years old cannot watch TV at all. Why? Because the brain at this stage requires to develop slowly. It picks things. It is forming the foundations of the entire brain in the first 1,000 days. So that when you expose children to a lot of things, images that are already preformed, they don't learn to form their own images in their own brain. So some of the best things that you can do to your child in these early stages is allow them to go and hunt rats. I don't know how many of us hunted rats. You know, when you lay the trap there and you have to run and make them run in the grass, and you want to ask me, nitafanya wapi hivyo kwa estate? The point is, allow things that are slow motion, that require the child to critically think, and just be there. That's better than when exposing them to images and video games and that. So I thought I'd just emphasize this because of that. So again, some critical things to think about in these early stages of development I've mentioned is what food you're giving, what is the impact of that on the brain development, what is the speed in which they are learning to do things. Just one thing to tell you why it's so important to remove kids from screen and allow them to engage in things that do what we call psychomotor, both hand and brain engaging. Our brains work well in communicating when we are able to do mental pictures. Meaning, if you ask me today to write a story of a trip to Mombasa, I should be able to write it even if I never went, because of the ability to create mental picture and have the vocabulary. That is why the Ministry of Education says when kids go to kindergarten or lower primary, they should speak in the mother tongue or father tongue. I think what the government is saying is, or the education experts is, speak in the language that is within your community. Why is that important? Because if you have mental picture and you are able to find the words to say what your brain has captured, that is now the intelligence that we're talking about in terms of your ability to communicate. You may have heard people say, you can be the best engineer, but if you can't communicate it, who cares that you're a good engineer? So these are things that, therefore, speaking to your child and not telling them, ha, ba, 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 don't speak those things to even a 3-month-old. Speak to them like speaking to an adult, because then it begins forming their brain. I thought I would emphasize a few things on that: mental health, food, communication, and the impact of technology on some of what is going on, because I see this as clearly occurring. Maybe just something very small also, let me emphasize there, is the importance of eliminating violence among children at that age. If there's violence in a family, it stays on you. You know, when I saw my psychologist and he was just trying to help me understand some of the things that I'm going through. Nothing serious bad, you know, but you know, those things that I'm feeling, can I be better? Can I identify myself well? Can I take care of myself better? Because if you can't do that, then you can't take care of others. And it took me back to what was going on. And there are things that I could remember so clearly. When I did the math, I was 4 years old. And those things have affected my identity today. You know? So violence is a very critical thing. I know sometimes we see people say, I'll just stay in this marriage because of the children. There's no help you're doing there. I'm not telling people to walk away from marriages that are violent or whatever, but I'm saying, please take off violence in your spaces with your children. Also ensure that there is consistency. Repetitiveness is very important. When you tell your child, we will be having a devotional every Thursday, try and do it every Thursday. If you tell your child, I'm leaving in the morning, don't hide while leaving. Be there, let them see you, let them cry, but make sure you tell them I'll come back at 5, at 7 p.m., be there at 7 p.m., tell them it's 7 p.m., I'm back. What does that bring? It brings confidence. Makes children appreciate that their life is predictable and they begin building self-esteem. Next step, middle childhood, 7 to 11. A major thing that is happening here is, of course, there's more growth, physique. They're beginning to grow. They're beginning to know the difference between perception world and real world. But also that at this age, they're beginning to have identity. Why are the boys standing when they're susuing and the girls are doing this? All those conversations now begin coming up very clearly. And it's really important that you are the first one to have these conversations with them. That is why when you're addressing things like sexual violence, rape, defilement, one of the critical ingredients to protecting young people at this age is helping them know their identity. I am a boy. This is penis. This is a vagina. This is what is done with it. No one should touch here. No one should say these things. You give them information. Mdogo mdogo. A good example on that is I met this professor who was saying, she's somewhere from West Africa, and she was saying she had her first sexual encounter with a boy because she wanted to see whether it is true, and she was below this age of 11. She wanted to know whether it is true that if you sleep with a boy, a tree will grow in your stomach. So this is the impact of not giving correct information. But of course, we know you can't give it all together at the same time. So the question of identity becomes very critical. This is where we plant, I am Kikuyu, I am Luo. You can plant it positively, plant it negatively. Again, this is an age when they begin having peer relationship in school. So one of the things that we are noticing as practitioners in child development sector is increasing cases of depression, for example. And if not managed in this age of 11 or so, we see it coming up in increasing suicide rates among teenagers. Actually, right now, I'm part of a study for Facebook where we're trying to map out in about 4 countries to show the relationship between social media and increase in teenage suicide rates. Because the data is showing there's an increase. There are those who are saying it's because these kids are spending too much time on Facebook. But there's actually a reality that there could be a link between social media and that. Why? Because identity is such an important stage here. And if you expose them to things like social media very early, what is likely to happen? They'll find bullying. They will find people who are out looking at the child and trying to use their image to make money. One of my friends mentioned that she had, I think she was in Form 3 then, the daughter. And they have this very good practice in their house where in the evening, everyone puts their phone in one place and goes to sleep, not going with phones to the bed. You leave them somewhere in the sitting room. Why? They want to limit the amount of time people spend in hidden spaces, or even just reduce the impact of screen technology on their brain development. And so one morning she wakes up a bit earlier and she remembers I didn't call so-and-so. So she picks a phone and didn't check, notice that it's the daughter's phone. And there's no passwords again in the house on these phones. Again, an important thing you can do at home. She opens and she sees a message. Oops, the boyfriend whom she knows has said, send me a photo of you while you're nude, without clothes. And you see the impact of that is this can quickly go around. Once he has the phone, he can say, you know what, I will post this on Facebook unless maybe you have sex with me. Unless you see, it now gets into blackmail. And so the whole question around what people identify with, they want to belong into peer. Like I'm saying, they want to be on Facebook or TikTok and have the largest number of followers. To an extent that people even buy, young people are buying followers. Why? Because I want to be known to be really equally important. But the effect of that is they're getting into spaces. There's what we call the dark web, the dark side of internet. What people are doing there is a huge industry, but some people have died by suicide, young people, because they couldn't identify themselves. And they found themselves trying to identify with a peer and in the wrong way. So are you there in that space as a caregiver? Are you able to support them to identify themselves? Recognizing and acknowledging a child at this age is extremely important. Letting them know that they are not an identity of their performance in school, for example, because again, we put too much pressure very early. So you can imagine there's so much pressure I'm getting out there in school. I come home, there's too much pressure. Let home be the place where I feel confident that I'm accepted the way I am, irrespective of what is going on in me. So identity, peer pressure, very, very critical issues that you want to be part of. This is the stage where you bring what we call self-esteem. I think in the first case, you did a class, I think with Nguku. And one of the things in learning parenting, a question we often ask with a very good set of good questions is, what is the most important investment you can do to your children? Is it taking them to school? Is it loving them? Is it self-esteem? You must have done that exam, that self-assessment test. And the correct answer is self-esteem is the most important gift you can give your child. It's not even school, trust me. You know why? Some of us today, we are unable to take a loan and do a project like a business or build a house because our self-esteem is so low. Our ability to take a risk is so low because we are always second guessing ourselves. I'm like, can I really do this? Can I really do this? So we are stuck in a very limited part of our abilities because of self-esteem. Why? Because your father told you you're stupid and it's stuck. Your mother told you you amount to nothing, or they did not celebrate your achievement. So these are some of the things why you need to visit counselors, psychological counselors, help them deconstruct this and find who you are. So identity is very critical in the middle of childhood. The last stage I want to briefly describe is the adolescent and the transition to adulthood. Very critical. Now, I hope you're also noticing how these things are incremental. If I had a bad first or pregnancy, in terms of my mother used to smoke or drink or was exposed to violence and had anxiety, I pick those. I get into a family where there's conflict and I'm not appreciated, and my peers, look at all that I've picked. Then I get to a stage where I'm now dealing with physical changes that are into puberty. My hormones are beginning to change. I get more mood swings. I'm doing that, I don't know myself, and I don't have people whom I can go back to. What do you expect of that? It's no wonder that groups like Al-Shabaab have preyed on this. Why? Because they meet this very confused person who lacks identity, but all they do a lot of times is not because they have money, it's they're preying on the identity issue. And so that's a very critical age. So coming in and supporting your girls. Let me talk to fathers. I'm also a father of girls. Very critical. I use opportunities of any conversation to talk about sexuality, to talk about how to manage menses, and work with my wife to try and support my daughters to be able to know what to do. To talk to the school, to the boys, to know that you don't laugh at girls because you've noticed that they have, the blood from the period. And these are very important conversations that need to begin from home, not from outside. Again, one of the things we've noticed in the child protection space is just how many girls have been sexually abused by boda boda. Why? Because the boda boda is willing to buy a pad for the girl. So very critical stage where people need to understand this. Let me mention one last thing here. I've heard people say, "Mbona unakuanga kama mtoto?" And you're thinking, why is this 12-year-old behaving like a child? Maybe a good question to ask ourselves is, at what stage do you say this person now is an adult? Why did the government or the scientific world say it should be after 18? It is because of the development of the frontal lobe. The ability of people to know the consequences of their action is developed many times after age 22. So much that some countries are even arguing maybe our age of majority or the age of adulthood should be moved from 18 to 24. So please, these guys will have finished Form 4 by the time they're 18. Perhaps they encompass, they're 19, and you're thinking, why are you behaving like a child? A very critical part of the brain development that helps in knowing that when I do this, this is the consequence, begins developing after 22, 24 and above. I think some data is even saying for men, it takes longer. That from 40-year-old, ndio sasa imeanza kumachua vizuri. So no wonder some of these men, please sisters, be kind to them. Brain bado inamachua kidogo, especially the critical part of frontal brain development that helps you to know. What does that mean? I asked earlier on, what is the best age to say whether your parenting has succeeded or not? Maybe after 40 years. Yeah, if your child is not yet become a disciple after pumping so much scripture to them, give them time, maybe they need to be 40. Is it like Joshua? No wonder. So maybe enough for that conversation, and hopefully you're inspired. I just want to throw this one as the last thing on the child development. There are a number of things that are happening in a child's development as they age. Now, I don't know what you will consider as the most important part of a development of a human being, but as you can see here, there is the physical, there's the lymphatic tissue, meaning the part that carries the blood, the parts that fight disease, there's the genitals, the sexual organs, the hormones. There's the physical growth, you're seeing the expansion, and the height is going well. That is why we keep measuring your height versus weight and check if there's a problem. It could be, a medical issue. But look at the graph for the brain. You see that? The most change is happening from 0 up to about 6. Then it starts going slowly after 10. And then that's it. After that, it's just a frontal lobe that helps the brain to make a difference between what is wrong and right. What is the consequences of what I'm doing? So sometimes I meet parents who are struggling with, their children in campus who have gotten into drugs, and you're wondering, what's wrong with my child? Why can't he think like other children? First of all, to appreciate there's a lot of grace in these things. I told myself I'll print a t-shirt written, "I survived teenagehood." It's purely grace. Yes, I don't know what you will do, but what it has encouraged me to do, I think as parents, if there's anything you can do most for your child, perhaps it's not even to pay the school fees, but it's to pray for God's grace in them. It's not always your mistake. There's a lot that is happening, but look at it. A lot of these graphs are taking up to age 12, thereabout, and then they're tapering, they're becoming flat after that. So what we're talking about here is exactly what our church will look like tomorrow, is what our country will look like tomorrow, if we invest in this age correctly. Let me quickly touch on the other component of life skill, maybe a few minutes, then we'll have a bit of conversation, question and answer, if there are. I hope there will be none. So life skill, what is life skill? I like this definition by UNICEF. I hope we all know UNICEF, the United Nations agency that is responsible for children. It says life skill as behavior change or behavioral development approaches designed to address balance of 3 issues: knowledge, attitude, and skills. I hope you got that. 3 things: your knowledge, your attitude, and skills. You've heard it said that my people die for lack of knowledge. You've also heard it said your altitude that you can go is dependent on your attitude. Very true, right? What's the attitude you're putting in your children? There's a whole, what we call programming around resilience. I had an opportunity to work with UNHCR as supporting their programs in the refugee camps. And we were addressing HIV and sex work. Okay. Of course, among children, you will not call it sex work. There's a way in programming you could say, okay, adults who wants to do sex work, fine, reduce their risk. But for children, it's a no, remove them out. And I had 200 children from Kakuma refugee camp who identified as selling sex. And I was asking myself, there are 20,000 children in the refugee camp. Why will these 200 get to a point where they say, well, I don't care what you think. This is me. Of course, there's a positive part that they can self-identify, and maybe you can work with that and bring them out. But what I'm saying, attitude is a very critical part of life skills. And then, of course, the skills themselves. What are some of these skills? There are about 10 life skills that most programs will try and incorporate in yourself, in your children. The first one is problem solving. Again, let's go back to a bit on CBC and all this. You know, personally, because I work in a space where I sometimes get a chance to employ people or do such things, the one thing that I keep looking out for is problem solving skills. Sometimes a guy comes, I've never seen their certificate. I don't even ask them for their CV. Because who cares if you will need to sit there and do nothing about yourself? All I want are people who can fix the world, who can make things better. That's why you're employed. You're not employed to come and be a conveyor belt, because then we are going to make machines that can do that. But problem solving, and where do you build problem solving in your children? It is in the daily things that you do. You know, I was spending time with a friend of mine today, and we were just talking about how one parent who has a car and can afford several cars, can afford an Uber and all that, will get into a car, drive to town, give bus fare to the daughter, and say, you go to town. I'm not giving you a lift. I thought, that's really good. Because then in between there, the little girl has to think around, how do I get to the bus stop? How do I do this? How do I do this? Now, problem solving skills are designed in the education curriculum incrementally. The whole cycle of education is about problem solving. That's what people are supposed to learn. They're not learning how to run ABC and how to do mathematics correctly. It's how do you solve problem? Where does problem begin? I have seen takataka imeanguka kwa nyumba. There's a sweater imeachwa katikati ya floor. Did I pick it or not? So it goes into those very practical daily things that we've got to involve our children. That's why it gets very sad when you have parents who say, oh, I have a house help. Extremely wrong, because then you're not building problem solving skills. The other one is critical thinking. In our CBC, this is another thing. Hopefully no one here is thinking I'm campaigning for CBC. By the way, I will, because she's a game changer. Again, I've told you, I receive people who come, they are having master's degree, and I want to fire them the next day because they don't have critical thinking abilities. How do you build that? It doesn't happen in school. It begins at home. And someone can't be a problem solver and critical thinker if they have low self-esteem. You can't, because you have to engage beyond trying to save myself, beyond trying to think about me as being the most important, into thinking about others. Can you see how that even comes into the gospel? We can have a church of people who are complaining and saying, oh, you know, this church, oh, you know, this is, oh, this workplace, oh, this home. No self-esteem, no problem-solving skills. So you, as a nurturer, as a parent, as a caregiver, must be very intentional in bringing critical thinking in your kids. Extremely important. We'll not have the time to say how, but for sure I can tell you one thing. Spending time with your children is so critical in building critical thinking skills. Okay? Getting them to involve in solving life problems and thinking out of the box. That is why, okay, I've seen us do some mistakes, but again, CBC is, for example, saying, well, we are supposed to go and do a collage of photos. You don't need to go and print or go buy a broom. Let them look at the local material and do it. So basically what I'm saying, we must be the first teachers. We must be the ones to inculcate critical thinking. The other one is effective communication skills. This is so important. I mentioned earlier on, you can be the best engineer in this world, but if you can't tell us what you know, who cares that you know it? And who is going to give you a job? You know, I had someone from the US Embassy pass by and he met some interns in my office and he was going to ask them your name. And this guy goes so lazily saying, my name is Tony. He's like, what? As a young person who is aged 17 or 22 in the university, you don't have the experience, you don't have enough education, you don't have the money. The only thing you have is your voice. So can you imagine growing up in a house where you're always being shut down? Encourage your kids to speak confident, to know how to read, how to write. Where does it begin? Remove TV. Have more time of reading stories with your children. So this thing about reading the Bible before your kids sleep, I know sometimes I falter in it, but it's one of the most powerful tools for brain development and for teaching your kids how to do communication. I like to tell stories with the kids, very powerful tool. You know why? Because when I sit down and I start telling my child, and the elephant came and it walked, boom, boom. I'm sure even right now your brain is beginning to create that image. Now they build that skill and put it out there in their daily life. A lot of people who end up rising even in governance, in politics, sometimes even their critical thinking isn't as good, but their communication skills are up there, you're good to go. So encourage the kids to pray in the house, because that's where they build confidence. They're prayed amongst 3 people. Wow, I can pray in the 5 now. Okay, then I can do it more. Let them draw, because there's a lot of power in that. Then decision-making skills. I give the example of my friend and what you're saying about the this mother and the daughter. Take matatu, I've given you 200 shillings, ujipange. Decision-making. Nikinunua sweet, nikinunua ice cream, nitabakia na ngapi, how much is matatu, when is it cheaper to use a matatu? All those are very, very important things. Creative thinking, again, very, very important. One of the goals I'm praying and saying for my daughters is I want them to be creatives who are confident. If we can develop in a lot of people in this, they really find their space and they're able to solve problems and stand out. I'm conscious time is running out. Interpersonal relation. Wow. I don't know how I can emphasize this, but where do you get it? You know, I told you in my early childhood, I had a bit of a problem. I can say this. My mother left us when I was about 2 years old. So I grew up with a stepmother who was very kind, but her sister, man, that woman was evil. You know, she will do things. And so I was abused. I was so intimidated. My parents would come back, you know, my stepmom and my dad, and I would run and hide under the bed. Partly because she will have beaten me in the day, I have marks and I don't want them to see it. And I couldn't speak before people. I can guarantee you, one of the things that has made me grow better is the kind of fellowship that we've had as a church, as singles in church. You know, those group activities we went and did. But sometimes I see people saying, oh, they've asked us to go to Uhuru Park to do things, or to, what is that other place we go? Near State House, you know. And you're saying, you're miambili sina. And you're thinking that you are saving. You know, some of us used to go to Kids Kingdom, go and teach in the children classes. Because when you are there, you're helping the kids know how to have a relationship, but you're also building a relationship with yourself. You're breaking these things that make you feel less confident or being able to speak. Self-awareness, I've already mentioned some of that. Empathy. This is really missing in our people. The ability to think about others first rather than me. Then this last one, man, this is where suicide rates are happening. So I told us, a lot of us, unfortunately, have come up from so many things, so many mistakes done by our caregivers. And we don't have coping on how to manage stress and other emotions. But this is a very critical area. It can be unpacked through many things. But I also think one of the critical conversations we need to have, even as church, is to know that mental health is not just about being mad or being bewitched. It's also a clinical issue. It could be biochemical issues that you just need a medication that balances you. And being able to know that you can go and see a psychologist and it's fine. The same way you will say, I feel kama niko na malaria, wacha niende nipimwe. Can we be able to encourage this? And there's a lot of mental health issues, emotional issues that are happening among young people, especially in the teenage, because of sometimes all these building things that have been happening in their life. But they're almost made to feel like you cannot go out there and seek help. You know, so for me, I'm trying to actually develop an app, working with a team, that young people can go on their phones, on their Facebook, do a self-assessment. It will tell them you are in the green. This is what you do. You know, engage with others. You are in the orange, in the amber. This is what you do. You are in the red. Please see a clinician. This is the contact. So I think we need to encourage this. Lastly, on this, the World Health Organization has categorized life skill broadly into 3 things. So all those things we've said there, in critical thinking, decision-making skills, that's one package, very, very important. It doesn't only happen in school, it starts at home. I think I've said a lot of that already. Interpersonal communication skills, very, very important, and then coping and self-management skills. Now, if we were together in person, I would have thrown this to us. The thing I would want us to do is to begin mapping out what happens in each of the stages of development, what kind of life skills are required. So for example, in the early childhood development, a 4-year-old, there are things they need to be able to learn, you know? They need to be able to know how to feed themselves. I know there's one place a lot of parents struggle, maybe with their 2-year-olds and even younger age, and you say, anakula na mwaga chakula all over. No. Part of life skills there is akule na mwage. You know, that is part of learning how to hold a spoon, how to do things. What is the role of caregiver at that age? You need to be aware of what kind of food you need to give a child. You need to be there for them, encourage them. Akimwaga sio kupigwa. Mbona umemwaga chakula? Remember, the age of knowing what is the consequence ya kushika spoon vibaya. For some of us, we started knowing it when we were 22. So please, that's a 2-year-old. They have 20 years to learn it. Take it easy. Middle childhood, I mentioned the importance of self-identity. Okay? How do I relate with others? Very, very important. Can I know that I can say no and still be accepted? Very important. Okay, we have a program on preventing substance use. It's called Keeping It Real. Real meaning, can I refuse? Can I explain myself to other children and say, this is why I'm okay. I want to belong in the group, but I don't have to do what you do. It's called Keeping It Real. The A is the ability to avoid. You know, I should tell my children, if someone is smoking, tell them, I'm okay, I don't have to smoke. If they really insist and push, you should be able to explain it to them why you've taken them. I fear God, or I know this, but I still want to belong, and be confident. Next level, avoid that group if it's not working. How do you leave that? You know, it throws me back to my own experience after my 4th form. And I was out there in a village in the Simba, and we were about 8 of us. And someone put something on a gazette, akakisha, I'm thinking, this must be bang, I'd never seen it. So it goes round, and it comes to my turn, I'm thinking, will I take, will I not take? If I don't take, they'll think I'm a less of a man. So train young people in keeping it real. Real means R, refuse. E, explain. A, avoid the group. L, leave that group. We've got to be able to train these people. What is your role as a caregiver in that? You can't be the guy smoking, drinking, and telling the guys he needs to leave. Because again, children learn what we do, not what we tell them. And then, so give them the skills in that. Then the last stage, the whole issue of adolescence, the transition to adulthood, how we support them in managing the puberty, the changes in their body, the roles, the stress in school, and all that. Very, very critical. Giving them skills, again, on how they manage that. The girls need to know, how do you carry your menstrual pad? How do you pack it? How do you dispose it? The boys need to know there's a consequence. Having sex around with girls does not make you a man enough. You know, those are conversations we need to have with our boys. So, in the interest of time, let me conclude here. The child development and life skills is a product of both nature and nurture. We have personality types. As our children choose careers, let us be aware about personality types. If you've not done a personality test, please do it. There are those who use colors, red. I am a red personality, I'm a blue, I'm a green, I'm a yellow. There are those who use the melancholies and the cholerics. Please do that. And also help your children to choose their careers based on that. Okay? That's a whole class for another day. I can't do it now. The other thing is that for development to work out well, you can have all the food and everything, but life skill is very important because we are social beings and we need to be able to know how to live together and how to live on our own. The other thing is the parenting. The age between 0 to 18 is so important. That is what you become when you're 80. Yet, it cannot be an accident. You can't just wake up and say you're parenting. You know, some of us are so busy. You're leaving every day at 5 a.m. and you're back home at 11 p.m. You're staying in the same house for 1 week. Your child has not seen you. My friend, these 18 years are so short. Before you blink, they will be gone. And you will pay the price of that for the rest of it. The most important gift you can give your children, again, depending on their temperaments and their personalities, their love language, but for most times, being there to explain things that they are seeing, what they see on TV, explain what does that mean. Appreciate the importance of involving children in these kind of changes that are happening in their own life. Okay? Don't come and say, I don't want anyone to dress this kind of a dress. No. Let's have a conversation. Why have you chosen a jeans and not this? You know, have a conversation. That way they learn the problem solving, critical thinking. No one is born parent. There's no school that teaches people to be parents. What do? We can be intentional. Go out and learn. Subscribe to classes like this. The whole parent coaching program, I have accessed some of them. Some of them can be very expensive. There's one we were paying $500,000 for it for a 1-year course. But it's a very powerful thing that will help you. More importantly, I mentioned that myself, I survived teenagehood. It wasn't my good parents' parenting. God's grace is so important. Let us spend more time on our knees and pray for our children and be there for them. Thank you very much. Over to you, Bubas.
Thank you so much. I felt like you just continue just teaching and teaching and teaching. And this is quite rich, quite a lot of knowledge, basically, that you passed on to us. It's I don't know what to say. This has been quite an amazing class. But this was quite rich. I like what you've taught about just child development. Many a times we think that we are helping the child by trying to keep them calm when we tell them, making noise, we give them a gadget to stay 24/7 on it, thinking that we are helping, yet we are actually not, but we are destroying even much more. It's and just the way we relate with them. I mean, this is quite profound. I mean, it's I'm looking at all this and I'm trying to imagine this is not just what you get free of charge. These are trainings that people really pay a lot for, and as disciples, we really need to be very, very, very grateful that we can have this forum to learn all these skills that will help us to raise our children well. I know, as you were saying, that instead of keeping them glued on television or gadgets, you can go out and either play or do something, chase rats, as we used to chase grasshoppers. and it's important to get them just out in play. One thing you mentioned that, like also for you and how it helped in terms of also being a disciple and just going out on fellowship, either at Arboretum or in those parks and all that. That just helps us to see that how important then this is for us, even at this time, we want to take our children out to these places. Growing up, I remember our parents would take us out many a times. We are either at Uhuru Park. Many of us who are here, I mean, just as Uhuru Park to go and row those boats, if people can remember. I mean, we would go out to do those kind of stuff. We'd go out to even maybe folks drive in to watch a movie as a family. There are quite a lot of activities we did outside of home that also helped a lot, just being together with a family. And I'm seeing the way we've actually dropped the ball and see how we need to get back. to just making sure that also our kids are well developed as they grow. I like what you said about the best gift that I can give to my child, self-esteem, because if they don't have that, I will have a very poor generation coming in the future. So we want people who are able to have good command of themselves as well. When someone is trying to push you in this direction, this is a person who can stand for their own and say, this is what I stand for. And that is by basically what you're saying, having those discussions together, talking together. The kind of example I also said before them, I feel challenged by when you're saying that if we are saying we're going to have devotionals every Saturday, then it needs to be consistent so that they can be able to also develop well and be able to build trust in their lives as well. But if I'm breaking, I'm not consistent, I'm not on point, then it also affects them in the development. This was quite profound. I like the way also just being able to see their skills versus their temperaments. So sometimes you want to put someone who has a different personality to go and do or learn a skill that they are not cut for. And at the end of the day, you wonder what's happening. The other day, I was hearing of a student who was giving up college because it was actually on a fourth year of college, and what she was going to do was not what was her. And she gave up her studies to go and do dancing. And I want to be more like, hey, what really happened here? But you see, it's like what you're saying. Can we look at this person's personality and what skill they can choose, what path they can also go with, and see I can encourage more and more. But basically, just all about discussions. I'm really grateful for this. I'm quite seeing a lot about it. My wife would like to share something.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sam. We have learned quite a lot. And I just like the way you started by saying this is about being intentional as a parent, and that is what I'm taking. And I think you've mentioned the word grace twice, which I really appreciate, because it's easy to listen to such a class and start thinking, what have I done right? What have I not done right? You know, for example, for me, I have, I think, an adult now and a little one. And it's easy to start looking at the stages and to imagine all the mistakes maybe I've done. But thank you for reminding us that grace is sufficient and I can start somewhere, I can correct, do my best. As long as I maintain a learner's heart, then God is with me and God is with us, and God will keep guiding us and helping us through. So thank you so much. It's such a privilege to be able to have you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I guess also a lot of people are expressed appreciation of what we've had this day. It was quite an amazing class altogether. Very deep stuff. Thank you so much. A powerful class. I've actually learned a lot. This is very helpful. Deep stuff again. Thank you so much. This is very helpful, very profound, still digesting. Amazing insights. Thanks for such a rich class, being intentional. Parents, deep stuff. God bless. Very powerful. As a parent, I need to be intentional in my caregiving. Barikiwa. Thanks a lot for such an educative class. Great learnings indeed. There was Newton was asking, can you tell me the A in drill?
Yes, yes.
That was avoid, refuse, explain, avoid, leave. I guess that is one that many people wanted to also capture. But I want to believe that you will share with us the notes later on. But those also is recorded. We'll be able to post it later on in the group for those who've been able to want to listen to it again. I think this is something I also want to listen again.
Yes.
Because parenting still continues. We want the best for our kids. And so I want to know how I can be able to enable that child development going on very well. And I can also be able to see the different life skills they can be able to adapt in themselves. We have 4 minutes to go. I don't know whether there's anybody who has a question. Probably have one or two within those 4 minutes. We see how it goes. Anybody who has a question can raise their hand, giving us this 4 minutes. Okay, so what we will say is we'll have the question and answers later on, because that's a forum we also have all together. We'll be having that session going on. What we say is, if you have questions from all the sessions we've covered, you can send to either me or Evangelist Michael Dwalo, and then we can be able to compile them and then be able to have that session where we can have the question and answer. And good enough, we also have our panelists. And I must confess that we also added one of the panelists now, and Sam will definitely be one of those panelists when it comes to those question and answer time, so they can be able to respond to many of the questions that will be coming up. So thanks once again, everyone, for being with us today. It's been a great and wonderful session, learning together. We all feel blessed, basically, by what we've been able to cover today. And we are grateful to God for giving us this opportunity. Let's keep praying for our children. Yes. I know with God's intervention as well, He is able to, like what we keep learning again, Jesus is the answer to everything in our lives. And so when we also employ Him in all these things, right, then our parenting can become better, and we can see our children be better as we continue. So would like to close it out.